Welcome to the Shared Practices Podcast, Season 6 on growth. The most quintessential time where you need to grow a practice is when you're doing a startup. And so I'm always excited in this season to capture startup stories of successes and the things that worked and didn't work in marketing and growing a practice from scratch, which can be terrifying. So we have today a guest that is coming out of a year of startup through COVID, and I'm really excited to introduce her to the show today, Dr. Lindsay Cash. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
This is exciting. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and like your ownership journey to the decision to do a startup.
Yeah, so I graduated from MUSC in Charleston, South Carolina in 2013. I completed a GPR in 2014 and then had several associateship jobs over the last several years. In 2018, I hit the point where I was like, I'm just going to have to do a startup. What I was finding, my initial goal was to do a practice acquisition because you've got the immediate cash flow. And what I was finding, the more that I looked, is that doing an acquisition now it's a totally different decision than it was, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, because DSOs are so heavily on the scene now. And what I was finding is that the most promising practices, the ones that would have been a diamond in the rough, so to speak, and profitable right out of the gate, are all being scooped up for like 120% of what they're worth, which, as doing an acquisition, I mean, that wasn't feasible. That just wasn't feasible for me. So that's...
And that's like, we tell people to try and do an acquisition first. And so, put your feelers out there, see what's available in the market, talk to the brokers, talk to the specialists, do mailers, try and find off-market deals. But there comes a certain point where you're just like, what I want doesn't exist in this market right now. And I've been trying for long enough, and I'm ready to just start my own. And I think financially sometimes, especially when your alternative is to buy something for 100+% of collections, to do a startup for 500K or whatever it ends up being, if you can get that practice up to speed in a relatively short period of time, your debt to your asset ratio is actually pretty good in a startup situation. It's a whole lot more work and risk.
It is, yeah.
That's the hard part, is just your heart and soul. It just requires all of you. But if you can do that, then it can turn out really well.
I guess the straw that broke the camel's back for me is that the last associateship job that I had, I was able to witness an acquisition that was handled very poorly. And it was somebody in a small town that was essentially collecting practices and creating his own mini DSO, but he wasn't making that clear to the sellers. And so he ended up with a lot of angry sellers that had kind of turned over their babies to him. And so then
not very transparent in that transaction.
Right. So then I was the associate doctor that was running a practice and had angry patients and an angry seller at me because he wasn't there. I was the face of that practice and got to see a very poorly handled acquisition. And what that kind of showed me is that if you're not taking over, if you're not acquiring a practice of someone that practices very similarly and treatment plans and diagnoses very similarly to how you think, you can end up with a lot of angry and mistrusting patients. The previous doctor at that practice was doing a lot of patchwork dentistry. He was doing, 5 and 6 surface amalgams, and I was diagnosing crowns on these patients that trusted him. I mean, they were long-standing patients that had been with him for the last 30 years, some of them. So he, that relationship went a long way. And so I was seen as the new money-hungry doctor on the scene that was just trying to overdiagnose and treatment plan crowns on things when truly the patients had been having a disservice done to them for quite some time. So, when I started looking on the market and checking into practices, trying to do an acquisition, I was like, I don't want to pay for the goodwill of a practice and then turn around and lose a ton of patients if I'm buying a practice from somebody that hasn't been doing the type of dentistry that I want to do in my practice. I didn't want to acquire not only patients, but a team that just felt like they got stuck with me. that
Right.
weren't choosing to be with me because they believed in my philosophy and my principles of dentistry. And so that's kind of when I just said, okay, I'll just make it for myself and figure it out trial by fire.
That's awesome, and I think you had 2 things there. You had a a bad experience, just straight up a bad experience, a bad taste in your mouth from that experience, and what some people might think like, "Oh, this practice for sure is gonna be a diamond in the rough because, they're just doing big old fillings." Well, not all the time, it's not always easy to deliver the bad news of, "Hey, I know we've been patching all these teeth, but really these teeth need crowns."
Right. And
Um,
regardless of why a patient is there, what the previous doctor has been providing them is what they're searching for, right? I mean,
sure.
they've been a long-standing patient in that practice for 10, 20, 30 years. The service they've been providing and the diagnoses and the treatment planning they've been providing is what they're searching for. That was the right type of dentistry for them. So if you're not providing a similar style of dentistry, you can really have that clash and end up paying for in an acquisition the goodwill of the practice and then turn around and lose a lot of it. So, it just wasn't the right fit for me.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So, one last question, related to kind of your background leading up to this. You had mentioned a GPR, and we get a lot of dental students who listen to the show who are thinking like to GPR or not to GPR. Where did yours, not getting too deep into it, but do
Mhm.
you feel like you had a good experience, okay experience, or it wasn't worth it on that spectrum? How do you feel about your program?
I had an awesome experience.
Cool.
I completed GPR with Palmetto Health, which has since undergone a huge acquisition. I think they're part of Prisma Health now, but we were doing IV sedations and implants and extracting thirds. And I got not only some great experience doing more advanced procedures that I wasn't exposed to in dental school, but just kind of like school of hard knocks training. You learn how to actually talk to a patient and how to function as like a baby dentist, essentially. Like you're fresh out of school, you're figuring it out, but you don't have somebody that's standing over your shoulder the entire time. So it's time to build up speed, learn how to do more advanced treatment planning. And even though I don't do all of those exact same procedures day to day, the amount of treatment planning and restorative that I gained from that lets me much more predictably not only treatment plan but prepare my patients for what they're going to experience when they do have those bigger procedures done. And it lets me kind of set up larger cases that I wouldn't have been prepared to tackle right out of school.
No, for sure. It amazes me like how even when people refer stuff out, if you kind of like don't know what's involved, it's hard to be a good referrer and treatment planner and like see what options the patient truly has. Um,
100%. Yeah.
and then you end up restoring those. So it works out great. Well, cool. Well, so we've decided now we're at this moment of, okay, startup is right for me. I'm going to do a startup. Talk to me about that decision of, do I get some help doing the startup or do I do it on my own? And going back to that risk and the work side of things where doing a startup is scarier. It is riskier in my opinion because if you botch it, you have nothing to fall back on. Whereas an acquisition, you still have that patient base, you have the employees, you've got a foundation to fall back on, even if you kind of get some things wrong. So talk to me through your decision to like get help on doing a startup or not.
Yeah. So um, I my goal and my practice philosophy has always been I want to own like one practice, maybe two at some point, and just crush it, just blow it out of the water. My goal has never been to acquire a ton of practices. I don't want to have 10 practices or 20 practices. That's just not how I choose to practice. Not that that's wrong. It's just not what I wanted in my vision. So I knew that I didn't have time to kind of make a bunch of expensive mistakes and then just course correct and fix that going forward. So I wanted to do that right the first time around. So given that that was kind of what I decided to do, I started researching into who can help me do that, because I always believe that paying some money or investing into somebody that has done this a lot that can save you a lot of money on the back end is something wise. Ask yourself, like, who's better than I am at this. um, so I kind of started looking around and I settled with Ideal Practices. So Ideal Practices was with me kind of through the entire treatment planning process, because there's a lot of things that you don't know that you don't know until you start digging. I didn't know that when you're looking for a commercial space, if you're the person that contacts, call now, space available. If you're contacting that person, you're going to get a totally different rate than if a healthcare realtor reaches out on your behalf. And there's a lot of expensive mistakes that you can make just because you don't know. You haven't done that process. So for me, using Ideal Practices to kind of guide me in that and be an unbiased third party gave me a lot of freedom to actually pit companies against each other to price compare. So what I was finding is that when I initially set out to do a startup, what typically happens is whoever your sales rep is at your associate job, somebody that you've known over the years, gotten to build a relationship with, as soon as they catch wind that you want to do a startup, they are your best friend. They want to
Mm.
wine you, they want to dine you because you're dollar signs to them, right? You're going to be spending hundreds of $1,000s on equipment potentially. So they want to be your best friend. And what happens is that person will then attach themselves to you, and you kind of feel indebted or pigeonholed into just doing the whole process with them because that's your comfort zone, right? Like you trust them, that's your person. But having Ideal Practices gave me the freedom to then come up with my equipment list and then take it to Benco, Henry Schein, and Patterson and say, look, here's what I'm seeing. Can you beat this? Rather than just feeling like I better stick with Patterson because that's the relationship that I've been doing meetings with them for the last 6 months on building this equipment list. So it gave me that freedom to kind of actually bid things out and see who was going to give me the essentially the best price, best quote.
No, for sure. And so going back to Ideal Practices as a whole, like in my opinion, I tell people all the time, and I've told my best friend who's getting out of the army to do this. I said, go take Breakaway and then go hire Jamie Amos. And Jamie doesn't like that I tell people to go take Breakaway. They're like, our course is great too. I'm like, yeah, your course is great. Breakaway is a great foundation of here is one set of systems you can use. And then Ideal Practices is more like, let's customize a dental practice to you and your needs and what you want, rather than take this cookie cutter and stamp it over and over and over into a bunch of different practices.
100%. Yeah.
And I think they do a combination of saving you money via and this isn't like a Ideal Practices sponsored podcast. I like them, and I would rather have someone work with them than do it on their own and get burned. Um, but I guess they do a great combination of doing a really good job of the execution, saving you money in all of these kind of negotiations and like what you're just saying with the real estate and different contractors and suppliers. And then the marketing piece, which is what I really want to get to with this episode today, is talking about how to market and grow a practice. What you were doing pre-COVID. Like, I would love to hear all of your startup plans and then your pivot of COVID. So let's start with the marketing before we knew COVID was going to happen. What did you do with gearing up and preparing to open your doors to market your practice?
Yeah, so I work with Wondrous, based out of San Diego, and Laura and Michael have been absolutely incredible to work with. And so I kind of turned over to Wondrous all the things pertaining to marketing that are super important, but that are totally out of my element. I don't understand how to effectively do SEO or to effectively scrub websites from all of your previous associateship information. Like when people Google you, if you've worked previously at 3 practices, 4 practices, 5 practices, whatever, you don't want people to be directed to those websites, right? And so there's a lot of back end, and Laura and Michael, if you're listening to this, don't hate me. I don't know what they call it, but like whatever it is to scrub all of that, they do. Okay.
Right.
So there's the SEO, there's effectively putting out where your Facebook ads are going to go, where your Google ads are going to go, setting a budget for all of that. That's what Wondrous does for me. But when it comes to day-to-day marketing in the community, ground level marketing, business to business marketing, I've kind of tackled that on my own. So they handle, the big stuff, but when it comes to day-to-day local marketing, we've kind of run with that.
Okay, cool. So did you do like logo branding website through them as well, I'm assuming?
So I did not. They did my website, but
Okay.
I crowdsourced my logo. I had a name, like I came up with a name, and then I crowdsourced it and did 99 designs for my logo design, which is really cool. Do you know anything about 99 designs? Okay. So
Yeah.
I love them because you get people bidding into your project and you get to see a ton of different logo designs until one speaks to you and you go kind of through these rounds of designing. And it was really cool because you get so many options to pick from until you find the one that's perfect for your brand.
Nice. So you had a good experience on 99 Designs. Then you worked with Wonderist on the website, and
Hmm.
they helped you with SEO, paid Google, paid Facebook. Um, how much of that had you done pre startup or pre opening day? Did you send out mailers before you open your doors? Did you try and like make an event out of it? What did you do? Because give us the date on your opening for your practice.
So my first day seeing patients was January 27th, 2020. So we were open for about 6 weeks before the world closed. So COVID hit. Um, we were we were so fragile. Like we had only been open 6 weeks, building a schedule out, and then we had to take all these patients that we had worked so tremendously hard for, and say like, sorry, we can't see you. We have to get you rescheduled. And the hard part was is we didn't know when. Like,
Right.
right? Nobody knew how long this was going to go. I think in the beginning, I thought like, all right, fine, we'll suck it up. We'll close for 2 weeks and like everybody will play nice. Everybody will stay home 2 weeks and then we'll be fine. Right. And
Hmm.
obviously we know that's not the case. That's not what happened. And so it's hard, it's hard to pivot on that and just start rescheduling people indefinitely. Like, what do? You don't want to push people out too far because then you're going to open your brand new office back up and not have anybody there.
It's terrifying. I mean, a startup is normally terrifying. You kind of had to like do a startup, hit pause, and then do a startup again.
Correct, 100%. But to get back to your question, things we were doing before we started. So we had Wondrous. They built us an awesome website. So we obviously had that up. We had local med going so that people could schedule appointments online. We sent out one round of mailers, but it was mainly just to let people know, like, hey, we're finally open, because the community had been driving past and they saw our sign go up. So it wasn't necessarily to hope to gain a lot of patients from that,
Mm.
because obviously with mailers, you've got to do months and months and several rounds to actually see what's going to be effective and what's not going to be effective. But for me, mailers are a really hard buy-in. I think it's totally based off the demographics. It can be awesome in some markets. It can flop in some markets, but it's an expensive thing to have to find out either way.
Okay.
And so I did one round of mailers and never did any more mailers. Not that we may not revisit that at some point, but I mean, they're expensive and COVID's
Sure.
happening, right? So like I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on mailers when nobody wanted to come to the dentist anyway, right?
Right. Right.
So
Well, and you normally have to kind of balance the like all in, let's pour a bunch of money into this, and the scrappy, let's do some stuff ourselves and see if
yeah.
we can find the higher yield. And there's this balance and tug of war. And it sounds like you went pretty like digital on the paid stuff and
Mhm.
then scrappy and DIY on the local stuff.
Yeah, 100% scrappy. Like
Okay.
100%. We did ground level marketing and business to business marketing hard. And
Is this pre opening doors, or is this after your doors open?
a little bit of both. So we threw I thought it would end up being like a small, like, hey, grand opening, ribbon cutting. And we had like hundreds of people show up, and a giant party at my office till after 9 p.m.
Whoa.
So I mean, that was fun. And that turned into a much bigger event than we anticipated that it would be.
Little did you know that was the last large event you would attend
That's,
for a year and a half.
that's
Uh,
so true. Oh man. So true.
so how did you pull that off successfully? What about that event, um, like the staging of that and the leading up to your grand opening, do you feel like led to how well it went?
You know, who doesn't like to party, right? Like I mean, it's always fun to throw a party. If I'm going to throw a party, I'm going to go all out. So um, we had an open bar and we had food there, and it was kind of just word of mouth. It was nothing formal, but we went to all the businesses that I had done ground level ground level marketing with and started to form those relationships with before we opened. And then once that relationship was there and it was authentic, then I went back and I was like, hey, we're doing our grand opening. I'd love to invite you in and let you see the practice. And it just kind of got out of hand. It, it kind
In
of
the best
snowballed.
way possible. I mean,
Yeah.
every person at that party had teeth, so, it's like
Right.
they're all potential patients.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a great way not only to meet the community and get our name out there, but network with other local businesses and get to know the business owners that were around me, which then played a huge role when COVID hit, because that was
Mm.
my group of people that we marketed towards. And so through this entire process, I've been huge on community support, local business support. And when COVID hit, and a lot of those people that we had formed those relationships with, started to need our help, we went all in on that. And so we started doing social media marketing for them. And so then they would repost everything for us. We were really, really big on support small business, like we're a small business, support other small businesses. And we networked a lot helping them. And in in return, that relationship got stronger and stronger, and they started reposting what we were posting, and it just became kind of a friendship, a give and take. And we would all get together and, donate stuff for the other businesses that were doing giveaways. So that was more exposure for us. And we threw a small business pop up, which we've started to do 3 to 4 times a year now, when we close our parking lot down and we invite like 30 other small businesses to come set up in our parking lot and do like a giant block party. Like we have the Cousin's Maine Lobster truck comes in, and we have Traveling Taps that comes in. And so we have food and we have alcohol, and we have a lot of the small businesses that took a really big hit from COVID. And it's just a chance for them to boost their sales and kind of get back out there and recover from COVID, because those are the businesses that got hit really, really hard.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we've had Michael Arias on the podcast, talk about ground marketing. Is that like, was he one of your influences in kind of how you began to reach out to these, or was this a lot of kind of stuff you were figuring out on your own and just going for it and meeting people?
It was a little bit of both. So I do follow Michael, and I listen to his podcast. I read a lot of what he does, and so I had some ideas from him, and some ideas from Wonderist, and some ideas from Ideal Practices. But honestly, it came from necessity. I had a brand new practice I had just invested into and couldn't do anything with it. And I was like, well, I can't just sit here and be reactive to the situation. If we do that, then we're going to open up. A, I don't know when, like, how long is this going to happen? B, when I do finally open up, nobody's going to know who we are, And so it, it definitely kind of puts you into crisis mode of, okay, how can I, even if I'm stuck at home, even if I can't get into businesses to do business to business marketing face to face, how am I going to do this? And social media was it 100%.
Well, and this is kind of what I want to get at a little bit is, when people talk about business to business marketing, like I had Michael on and I like pumped him for really specific. How do you actually do this? How do you walk into like a random neighboring business and like build a genuine relationship that somehow kind of is going to eventually lead to patients in some way, shape, or form. And he had all these amazing different ways of booth and leaving a list and coming back for that list. But it sounded like what you're doing is a little bit more organic than that. But are you offering any specials to the business owners, the employees? Are you
Yeah.
leaving stuff at their offices? How are you developing these relationships so that it's more than just like, hey, we're just besties who happen to own businesses next to each other and really kind of supporting each other?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of both. I did not feel like immediately starting with, hey, here's a special, try and come in. It was a little too salesman-y for me,
Sure.
because the relationship wasn't there. And if I mean, we do it every day, right? With sales reps that we don't have relationships with, like, I don't have time to talk to you. Like, I'm not going to give you the time of day. I don't care about your dental lab. Like, don't even come to my office. I have people I like that I'm
Right.
working with. Like, no. So I didn't even want to broach that subject until there was a true, authentic relationship where there already established. So for me, it was truly about showing them that we care about them and showing them that we're big on community outreach. We're big on supporting them and sharing their social media posts and getting to know them strictly over Instagram Messenger. Like 99% of this was accomplished over Instagram Messenger. Because what
Cool.
I found out is that the vast majority of businesses are going to have somebody pretty up high that's in charge of their social media accounts. So you're not just going to put, Joe Schmo that works your front desk. Like, he's probably not running your Instagram account, right? So
It's surprising, like, a lot of people, myself included, are not good at Instagram, and so, like, it's a harder thing to delegate out than people would think.
yeah, yeah,
A and the more close it lands to, like, this is the genuine experience that we're having and that we represent as a business, the better, and so, therefore, often it's kind of one of either the founders or, family
yeah.
members or, partners or, whatever of that business. So that's interesting that that's been a main avenue of communication for you and finding and reaching out to these businesses.
So full disclosure, I didn't even have an Instagram account before I opened a startup. but but right, like sticking your head in the sand and saying like, "Oh, I'm just not going to participate in social media." It's not an option, right?
Right.
Like you're a startup and that's free marketing. So you have to figure out how to harness that. And if you don't know how to harness it, you've got to either A, do some research in it and figure it out, or you need to pay somebody to tell you how to use it. And you're a startup, so you have no money, so you just figure it out. You're not going to pay somebody to
Right.
right? So I figured it out. And once you have that content up and you have some street cred behind your name, right? You've got content up because nobody is going to, like, you're nobody, right? If they click your message and they go to your account and you have one thing posted, that's
Right.
spam at that point, right? So once we had some content posted, we started reaching out to the other small businesses and just saying like, "Hey, we're a small business too. We know that you're struggling from COVID. We want to support you. Like, how can we help you?" And I truly meant that. What can I do as a fellow small business owner to help support you during this time? Like, do you want to run a special? Is there anything I can post for you? How can
Mm.
I help support you? Because when you come at somebody and you're sending them a message and it's not about you and what they can do to support you, it's the other way. Like, what can my company do for you to help support you during this time?
Mm.
Everybody's going to listen to you. That's free marketing, right? If somebody came to you and they were like, can I please post your social media on my social media for free? Who's going to be like, "No,
Right.
no, I don't want that," right? So when you form those relationships and you show that you're truly interested in seeing that business succeed, then that relationship grows. And then once I had that relationship there, and we had done some giveaways with those businesses and really started to form that relationship strictly over Instagram, by the way. I still haven't met these people face to face because it's COVID. You can't
Right.
just walk in somebody's business. That's when I started to approach people with, "Hey, we have an in-office benefit plan. I know as a fellow small business that you may not be able to offer dental insurance to many of your employees. So if you want to be able to offer them our in-office benefit plan, I'm happy to waive that enrollment fee for you to be
Mm.
able to provide that benefit to your employees." And people were super appreciative of that because that it costs them nothing. They get to look like a hero to their employees, and I'm losing an enrollment fee. Who cares? Like, I'm gaining a patient from that.
Right.
So that was a no-brainer.
And that's essentially like, you look at how much we write off for insurance, to have a membership plan, an in-house membership plan that you waive the fee and they get, whatever discount or whatever is included. You're probably coming out ahead from where insurance was.
You're way ahead. And that's what I realized when I crunched the numbers is I was like, I'd way rather have a really quality patient with no insurance that's getting a discount on my plan than to take some obscene Delta Dental hit.
Mhm.
And we have to accept some PPOs right now. We're a brand new startup. And so while that may not be in our long-term game plan, while we're establishing ourselves, it is. And so yeah, I don't want to build my practice on nothing but Delta Dental. So I'll take your patient or your employee that has no dental benefits and I will give them a really awesome benefit plan that costs you nothing.
That's
Here, you
fantastic.
can have it. It's yours.
That's amazing. That's like, I remember in in dental school when I was either reading something on Dental Town or like, listening to some podcast thinking like someday I'm going to have my own plan that I offer to patients and keep it all in house and go out to small businesses and kind of pitch this to them directly. But I never even thought of like just hand it to them. Just say, "Hey, here's this benefit you can offer your team," and it still makes sense for you financially to be able to do that.
Yeah, it 100% does. And we don't do it for everybody, but the people
Sure.
that we've built that relationship with, yeah, we do. And our specialists, right? Because most dental practices or many dental practices are in a position where they don't offer their employees dental benefits, right? And so if
Mm,
you work at a
interesting.
pedodontist or you work for an oral surgeon, like they'll probably pull your tooth if you need it, but like are they going to do your crown? No,
Right.
but I
No.
will.
No.
Like send them my way. So the specialists that we referred to that we had a really solid relationship with, and we started to reach out to them and say like, hey, we appreciate everything you do for our practice. We understand that your team may not have dental benefits. If that's the case, we would be happy to see them, and waive that enrollment fee because we really appreciate everything you do for us. And that's
That
huge.
that's really cool. I never even thought of like the specialist teams are lacking a lot of times some like general dentistry and they wouldn't. It's like I
Right.
wouldn't ask an oral surgeon to do a filling. Like I wouldn't want them to. Like even if
Right.
they offered, because they just don't do it all day every day. So okay, cool. So you've got your small businesses that you've reached out to via Instagram and built those relationships. You've got these block parties, and apparently you throw parties that people just show up to, which is amazing. You throw great parties, and then you're working with a specialist. Are there any other like um businesses or kind of relationships that you formed that have been a kind of a source of new patients that were all due to your networking and relationships?
I think a lot of my efforts have been towards people that have the same target patient profile, right?
Mm.
So my target demographic, if we look at it, is like middle-aged women, so moms, because we know that moms are typically the ones that make the appointments for the whole family, right?
They're a lot of times the healthcare decision maker.
Healthcare decision maker. And so I target other companies that have that same demographic, the mom. So um, children's boutiques, upscale clothing boutiques, plastic surgeons, where are the women going? Because I want them to hear about my practice and bring their whole family here.
Mm.
So those are the types of businesses I strategically target businesses that are going to also cater to my target patient, my ideal patient.
I feel like Howard Fran has talked about this a lot. When he says it, it always is like, I don't know if you're allowed to say that, Howard, but when you say it the way that you say it, it makes way more sense. It doesn't feel inappropriate.
Great.
Uh, because you're absolutely right, and I think that's brilliant to think about where are my ideal patients already, and can I kind of be where they are and have relationships with the people that are already serving that patient base,
Mhm.
rather than if you're not into seeing geriatric patients and doing dentures, or you're not into people who need a lot of ortho, teenagers or whatever, just depending on what your demographic is, that's where you want to be.
Right. 100. I mean, yeah, I want to, if I'm going to spend the time doing marketing, I want it to bring in the ideal patient, right? So that's kind of where I've targeted a lot of my efforts.
um so let's shift gears here. We've talked through a lot of the ground marketing you've done, which is great. This is the kind of stuff that like I feel like we can't get on the podcast without someone having just like tried this and done this recently, which you've done. In terms of your paid marketing, so you built the website, you're doing the SEO, you're cleaning up listings, then Google and Facebook ads. What worked well for you through pre-COVID, during COVID, as things have started to lift and open up. Um, and how did you decide those budgets as a startup, and how have you decided to pivot with those budgets?
So what I've realized uh, with COVID happening, a lot of the digital marketing, so Facebook ads, they're a lot cheaper than they were pre-COVID. A lot of
Hmm.
social media content and things like that are way cheaper than they initially were. And so I told you I work with Wonderist. I upload normally a video a month and send to them to run for whatever we've agreed that our marketing campaign will be for that month. And I found that video ads are really effective rather than
Mm.
just having a picture with some words underneath it. Videos have been really, really effective. But, you know, I I change what we're investing month to month based off of what's working. But I leave a lot of that up to Wondrist right now, according to where we're shifting things. Some of that, now that COVID is hopefully we're getting past all this, some of
Knock
that
on
will,
wood, fingers crossed.
yeah, some of that will probably start to change. But um, we're kind of in a hot spot right now. Like we're having really, really good results, like January, and then February was bigger than January, and March was bigger than February. So I'm a little apprehensive to change anything right now because we're seeing the results that we want. So we shifted, a few $100 here or there around with COVID, but we've stayed with our marketing budget pretty consistent. So we haven't done anything super drastic there. I find myself boosting Facebook ads every now and then, which is effective. But I feel like the biggest payoff for us has been using Swell for reviews and boosting our Google reviews, and business to business contacts has been huge for us.
Okay. So it's like you've got that baseline of the Facebook ads and Google ads going, but that the reviews. So how do you boost your reviews? That's like a new thing to me. As you said that, I was like, I didn't know you could do that.
No, not so boosting Facebook ads, not boosting reviews. We use Swell to kind of boost our review number that we get.
Okay,
Like we get way more reviews with Swell than we did previously without Swell.
cool.
So we boosted our number that way, but then we'll boost like Facebook posts and things like that. We'll
Okay.
boost those after they posted.
No, we love Swell, and as maybe you've heard on the show, we're trying to convince everyone in the world to sign up for them.
Swell is amazing.
Cool. That's good to hear. From a startup perspective, they are delivering in a big way for you guys. What has performed well in terms of campaigns and specials and videos with social media? Because it sounds like you've done a video per month. Video can be hard to like. We got to do another video. What are we going to do
Yeah.
this on? What are we going to talk about? Or this is awkward. I hate hearing myself, or all these things. What has worked well for you with video and social?
So I don't do videos for anything that I don't want to do, meaning I don't want to draw patients to my practice if it's a procedure that I hate. So we will run, it's not even necessarily about like a special or a campaign that we're running. It can even be something that's educational,
Mm.
an educational video. Or when our office finally opened back up, we did one all about COVID protocols and how our office was already super clean and brand new, and that yes, a few things have changed from COVID, but like we're already doing all the things, that our office is a safe place. Things like that. Nobody wants to be sold stuff. I don't
Mm.
click on ads when I see them on, Facebook or Instagram. And so I wanted it more to be about pulling back the curtain and saying, here's my team, here's my office, here's what we stand for. I also realized, and it was not lost on me, that um, dental practices were closed. And a lot of those dental practices that had long-standing histories had a big backlog problem,
Mm.
right? So now people that had practices where hygiene was booked solid for 3 months out, now they've got a 2-month backlog even more, and they have nowhere to put patients. And I'm a brand
Right.
new practice. I got space left and right. So if your dentist can't get you in, I'm happy to see you.
Mm.
So that was kind of a huge, not that I was stealing patients from existing offices, because I feel like that sounds slimy, and that's certainly not what I was doing. But if somebody had nowhere to put patients, I was getting patients that were calling me that were upset that their dentist that they had been loyal to for a long time couldn't see them for like
Couldn't get them
6
in.
months. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. And everyone was in a hard situation, and there was this period of excess supply and not enough capacity, or excess demand and not enough capacity. So it's like everyone had to fill in on and getting everyone seen at that point in time. So
Right.
I don't think that sounded weird at all. So I guess moving forward, what are you excited to continue to do and to move into? And do you mind sharing like new patient numbers or practice numbers? I don't want to put you on a spot and talk about stuff you're not comfortable talking with, but
Yeah.
if you can remember any of your kind of trends and numbers with new patients or the practice, it serves as a kind of a frame of reference for other people trying to do a startup.
Yeah, for sure. So we're averaging 50 to 60 new patients a month right now.
Okay.
If you take out the time we were closed for COVID, which was a little over a month and a half, then we would have just hit 12 months actually seeing patients. Gosh, I guess we haven't even hit it yet until March 27th. And we have a little over 700 patients right now. So I feel like it's been decent growth, especially given that COVID's happening.
Mm,
So we're doing well. I'm very proud of what our office is accomplishing and where we are right now.
that's awesome. And I think all of the people that you kind of surrounded yourself with and supported yourself with, plus all of the work and hustle that you put into it, is just all bearing fruit and paying off, which is incredible to kind of see the results of all of that.
It has. And, one of the things that I realized going through this process is that you just have to stay the course, especially with marketing. When it comes to marketing, you cannot get discouraged if you do a marketing campaign and you hear nothing and it's just like crickets. Because we're still seeing patients that are rolling in from marketing campaigns that we did even pre-COVID. And
Mm.
so it's one of those things where you kind of just have to really stay the course and keep plugging along until people decide to actually pick the phone up or to make an appointment on local med.
I just did a interview with Joshua Scott from Studio 88, and I loved his perspective on just set a marketing budget. And when you're a startup, this is a lot higher of a budget than most people. But if you buy a practice, or you're in an established practice, or even right now for you, you just set a certain budget, and like that budget isn't going to be crazy, whether it's like 3% or 4%, but over time, the like continual investment into that marketing just bears more and more fruit. And if you just keep that money reinvested into marketing over 10 years, that's a massive amount of ways that you've brought patients into the practice, and your name getting out there and exposure. So it's cool to hear you say that even within a year time frame, to see the difference there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, going back to when we talked about the mailers, I'm not shutting the door on mailers. They're expensive. I know that you have to do lots and lots of rounds to even, people have to see that mailer multiple times before they may pick up the phone. So I'm not closing the door on that. It just, when it came to deciding where my marketing funding was going to go, especially with COVID, it didn't seem like a wise investment for me because I throw that away. Like when those come to my house, they go straight in the trash. So I feel like I'm a middle-aged mom. So like I'm kind of my target demographic, right? Like I am
Right.
my ideal patient. And so a lot of the decisions that I have made off of what I've done for the practice, I try and put myself in my patient's shoes. And I'm like, if this came to my house, would I pick the phone up over this? And for me, that was a no with mailers. So I couldn't do it. I couldn't justify it.
And I think that's actually like a really sneaky advantage to think about it that way. To have It's awesome, and that's what shared practices was for me, was that like I was my target audience of like, what do I want to know about how to find and buy and run a dental practice,
Hmm.
and that's what I want on the show, and that has been where we've started, and how we've gotten traction to begin with. It's harder if you are not your target demographic of
Hmm.
like you're targeting geriatric patients who are looking at full mouth rehabs or all on fours, or overdentures, and they're watching daytime TV, and you'd never in a million years would watch daytime TV anymore. You
Hmm.
stream everything. um, so I think that's awesome that you can live in the head of your ideal patient, because you are your ideal patient.
Right. Yeah, it's totally an advantage. And I'm gonna play to that 100%. But I feel like I've made a lot of those decisions based off of would I like this? I mean, even down to the swag that we keep in my office.
Mm.
If I'm gonna give something away to a patient, it's gonna be something that's gonna be a walking billboard for me. Okay. So
Not
I'm
some annoying weird pen that breaks after
no,
the uses.
no, save your pen, save your plastic crap. I don't want it.
Well, let's
Um,
hear some swag ideas. Let's what have you done for swag that you've wanted or you like are proud of, swag wise?
so our probably our most popular is we have these like the ultra soft t-shirts.
Mm,
Bell and Canvas or Toltex t-shirts that don't shrink. Everybody wants to wear them. My entire team, myself included, we live in them outside of the office. Like it's everybody's go-to. It's their favorite shirt, and our patients love them. But what I've found is that if you're gonna offer swag in your office, it needs to be something that works for you. Meaning, I if I'm gonna give something to a patient, I want to make sure it's something they're gonna use, right? So
mm,
I'm not gonna give them the crappy, scratchy t-shirt that's the first one that you pull for the Goodwill pile when you get ready to clean out your house.
mhm,
And I'm not going to offer the coffee mug that the logo immediately comes off of as soon as it goes through the dishwasher and you just paid for zero marketing. So I offer several different items to our new patients when they come in, and then I let them pick what they want of
mm,
that because I want it to be something that I know that they'll use instead of me just saying like, here's a t-shirt, and that person hasn't worn a t-shirt since 5th grade. So I'll keep the super soft t-shirts that everybody's going to wear, even around the house, grocery shopping. It's a super comfy t-shirt. So I'll keep those. I will keep powder coated laser etched tumblers. I spend more on the swag that we give away because I want it to be something that people are not going to throw away or give to Goodwill or not use because that's wasted marketing efforts in my book.
yeah, and so for instance, I'm Dentist Advisors is a sponsor of the podcast, and I'm also a client of theirs. And for Christmas, I got a Yeti cup that then my wife and I have fought over,
Yes.
because I'm like, where's my Yeti? And she's been using it. I'm like, ugh.
Hmm.
And it's a whole different thing when it's like a coveted item in the household versus the, oh, here's yet another kind of cheap plastic thing that, why did they send us this? Let's just throw this away type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love the powder coated laser etched tumbler. So, similar to a Yeti or an Arctic. Love those. Love wine tumblers. I'll order things that are specifically like that I feel guys will appreciate more than girls. So we have the laser etched like can tumblers. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a powder coated laser etched koozie. So it's an
Okay.
insulated like sleeve. So we have those. But I order them in fun colors. Also, I don't strictly make it our office colors. So in the summer, we just ordered in pink and mint and purple
Nice.
shirts, and the guys have like military green shirts or charcoal colored shirts, and so we have a whole bunch of different stuff so that people continue to want to get that stuff. And we use Modento. So for being a patient that does their paperwork ahead of time or that shows up on time, they get points for essentially not sucking as a patient. So they can use those points to
Wait, this is a thing. I don't know everything about all of these, like, different companies. So what is Modento's primary purpose? And then I want to hear the point side of things.
Yeah, so we use Modento for all of our interoffice communication. So it's a way to not only for my team to communicate with each other, but for us to text back and forth with patients, text or email. They can choose which way they prefer to get it. And it immediately uploads all of that information directly into the ComLog in Open Dental. So
Okay.
any type of conversation that's had there's immediately a written record of that in a
Oh,
transcript in Open Dental. So we
nice.
use it for that. We use it for all of our forms, all of our patient communication. People can pay via our Modento app. So we use it for a lot of those things, but there's also a patient reward system built in. So it's kind of like Dave and Buster's for adults. So you can, you're going to rack up points the more loyal you are to the office, essentially. So if you refer a friend, that's going to be the biggest point item, right? You're
Mm.
referring me a new patient. And you go in and set what you want people to get points for and what you want the point values to be. But then they can turn around and use those things and cash them in for whatever we want to offer. So they can get more t-shirts or more engraved tumblers, or they can cash them in for a Sonicare or whitening or whatever they want. But they gain those points essentially by doing the things that we want them to do. So fill your paperwork out ahead of time, show up on time for your appointments, refer us friends and family, leave us a review. Those are all things that you're going to get points for.
How like, what feedback have you gotten on the point system? And like, do you see people, cashing these in, referring people, and then using those points? Is that, obviously not everyone's going to care, but
Right.
some portion is. Um, like, has it been a generally positive response?
I think it's definitely a positive response. I don't know that people use the points as much just because we're still in newer practice. So we're still trying to tell people like, hey, download our app because we can text with you. You'll gain points. So a lot of it is still patient education, but we definitely have a subset of patients that definitely keep track of their points, like really keep track of their points.
They're all about it. They're like, you
All about
turned
it.
going into the dentist into a game, and I'm gonna win this game.
Exactly. Yes.
So, before we wrap up here, are there any other services or things that you've used, either technology solutions or other solutions that either you highly recommend or had a bad experience and don't recommend? You don't have to out the companies by name if you don't want to on the don't recommend, because we did talk about some before
Yeah.
the recording.
Yep. I love Swell. We've touched on Swell. Anybody that's not using Swell should definitely look into them as far as review generation. Um, like I said, we've just hit our 12-month mark and we have like 200 5-star reviews, and that's thanks to
That's huge.
Swell and my team discussing reviews. So Swell has been a great one. Modento has been a great one. Um, Ideal Practices was phenomenal. I feel like we tried out some call answering services. We tried out 2 of them that we did not have good results with. But that's probably our go-tos.
And Wondrous, gotta throw Wondrous in there with the
Wondrous, yes.
um so the call answering services, like, for a while this was like an idea really pushed and thought of, and like people are like, oh yeah, why we should all do the call answering services, and then we can capture all these leads that we're missing, and maybe we even do it better than our front desk would do it. And it sounds like that just wasn't the experience for you.
It wasn't. When I tried to work with those companies and figure out, how long are you leaving my patients on hold? They couldn't even tell me those things. So I was really finding out the majority of the issues we were having from patients that were upset that they couldn't ever get through to my practice or to who they thought was my practice. So meaning one of the call center people. So I was getting complaints from patient, which as a startup is, I mean, that's a death sentence. That cannot happen. You're brand
Right.
new. Um, so yeah, that was the biggest thing. And some of that, to be fair, probably had a lot to do with COVID and the changes that were made from COVID, because we closed our patient reception area. And so we were having people call when they arrived, and that influx of phone calls
Mm.
around those new start times meant that we weren't always answering and filtering those calls, which meant some of them went to the call center. So I was paying over $1,000 a month, and the
Oh.
yeah, and the bulk of them were people calling from my parking lot to tell me that they had arrived,
Ugh.
and we were missing the important things like new patient calls.
Mhm.
So I think there's definitely some growing pains, and a lot, some of that was due to COVID, but yeah, we're done with that for right now.
Okay, cool. And it doesn't sound like you really have a desire to go back.
I really don't.
You're just like, you know what? We'll just grow
We'll just roll
great
with it.
team members in the front rather
Yeah.
than, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. This has been fantastic. This has been like shared practices is a combination of like experts and people who this is what they do all day, every day, is helping dentists with this one specific thing. But then the stories of here's what worked for me, here's what didn't, here are the details of why and how. And you've really laid that out for us. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm passionate about startups and helping other startup doctors, and really not just startup doctors, but we're kind of all in this together. And I feel like dentistry as a whole has gotten this kind of ugly competitive side and reputation for a lot of that. And so it's nice to be able to give back a little bit.
Absolutely. If people are looking to like reach out to you on Facebook or online, are there any, are you in the making of a dental startup page or our page? Like what groups do you frequent on Facebook?
I am, yeah. I'm in the making of group, probably more than anywhere else.
Sure.
But people can also feel free to reach out to me via email, and my email is Lindsay Cash DMD at gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and it'd be fun if we can never like get you on in like another year or another year. You know, I love the update episodes. So it's cool to hear your success, and despite everything that's happened in the last year, and you're going to continue to crush it. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool. Hey, take care.
Thanks. You too.
Awesome. We will talk with you all next time on the Shared Practices podcast.